Schadenfreude? Everybody must have screamed, ah! He's a sung hero. A little pushy. Are you back from listening to Stairway to Heaven twice? Now, those are just words I looked up on the internet.
Unreasonable Down, a podcast about West Virginia University basketball, starts now.
Hello! From the studio in Nitro, West Virginia, this is Unreasonable Doubt. It's a podcast about West Virginia University basketball. I'm Josh Witt. And I was not doing this podcast last week. Mentioned it on Twitter, but if you aren't on the Twitter machine, the Basketball Podcast Network closed its doors at the end of March. And it was a very fun ride with the Basketball Podcast Network for almost 2 years, and enjoyed the opportunity there, and wish all of the podcasters involved with the network the best in their future endeavors. But with that chapter closing, another chapter is opened. I'm partnering with the Smoking Musket WVU webpage. Great guys, excited for the opportunity to work with WVU people. So a big thanks to Joel and Michael and the rest of the Smoking Musket team. If you don't already, check out smokingmusket.com. Follow the Smoking Musket on Twitter at Smoking Musket. How does that affect the podcast? It's not going to affect it at all. I'm still going to be in my laundry room staring at my two cats while I'm talking into a microphone. Same sitch. Maybe less ads, which may be a good thing. But hopefully that's not a long-term thing. We'll see how that goes. More news as I get that, but excited to share that, and excited to share this, that my first guest in the offseason is Ethan Bock. And you know Ethan Bock, and I know Ethan Bock, and you love Ethan Bock, and I love Ethan Bock. And we talked on Tuesday, April 11th, and things are moving fast. So just in a couple of days, there's more WVU updates to share before I get into this conversation. Trey Mitchell announced he'll be back in the old gold and blue next season for his final year of eligibility. So Trey Mitchell's back, and Joe Toussaint announced that he's back. And so that's very exciting news. Also, when we talk about this in the conversation, the Syracuse center, Jesse Edwards, he gave his top 3 list for destinations. He gave it to on3.com. It's Gonzaga. You heard of them. It's Kansas. You heard of them. And it's West Virginia. So that's a wild top 3. The good news is that Edwards is visiting Morgantown first. And we can talk about that in the off season. We can talk about whatever's happened up to this point so far. Just so much has happened since the Cammy Awards, and we have plenty of time to get into that. But let's stop this part and get to my conversation with Ethan Bock. He covers WVU basketball for WV Sports Now. He's a basketball recruiting analyst for the Portal Report. He was the runner-up in the first annual WVU Twitter National Championship. He went through 6 rounds and got to the finals. Ethan Bock, welcome back to Unreasonable Doubt, a podcast about West Virginia University basketball.
Thank you for having me on, Josh. I'm sad I was runner-up, but hey, what a run that was.
Now, who are you runner-up to? I don't remember.
Smoking Musket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's a great nod. Okay, I didn't know. And I'm working with the Smoking Musket guys now. So that was a great, thank you for bringing that, for reminding everybody, not that they won, but that this podcast is now affiliated under the umbrella of Smoking Musket. I'm very excited about that. That's not why I have you here to rub your nose in that, and it's all fun. And I didn't even make the tournament. So, Portal Report, man. Wear your Portal Report hat, because I want to ask you some hard-hitting questions about a guy goes into the transfer portal, any guy, and then you and people that report on this get the list, right? The I've heard from list that varies in size. It can be 7 schools, it can be over 100 schools. And so I want to dig down on this. Maybe you have answers, maybe you don't on this. Does the order of the schools on the list mean anything when it's put out?
It depends on the player. So what will happen is we'll contact the player either through DM or have their phone number, and we'll just say, hey, what schools have reached out or contacted you? Everybody loves those lists. Like it's very simple. Like there's nothing complex about it, but fans love clinging to those lists. So the player will tell us in order what schools have reached out to him. Sometimes will be chronological, just off of who hit them up first, and then sometimes we'll prioritize. Sometimes you'll notice that it'll be based Power 5 schools first, and then the mid majors and the low majors, etc. So yeah,
but you don't ask those questions. You kind of decipher like we do as far as what the order is. It could have just been, all right, who have I been contacted, and they make that list, and that's what it is.
Yeah, don't read into too much into it.
It's too late for that, Ethan. We're already doing it, but that's probably the easiest and makes most sense answer is that it's just however they give it to you. That's how you report it. Let me ask you this. Does the size of the list mean anything?
It depends, because then you'll have the D2 kid, Pierre. He had 120 schools D1 reach out to him, which include like Memphis, Duke, K-State, like big names. I mean, so it just depends on I think it just depends on the talent of the player. It doesn't matter which level of play he's coming from. Like that kid from D2, he could play Power 5, and he's playing at Memphis next year in the American Conference. So it's not Power 5, but he had Power 5 interests. So it just depends on the player's talent.
He had a third of Division I reach out to him, which is insane. And I'm sure he left a couple out. So that's going to vary, and I'm sure it depends. It depends. I want a firm answer, but I know that I can't get a firm answer on these. Let me ask you this. Coaches and recruiting coordinators, they see the list. What do they learn from the list? Are they parsing it like fans do? Are they looking for specific things? Is it like, okay, that school's involved, so we need to get involved? How do you think they take the list, and what do they do with that information?
I think, again, it just depends on the coach, because we've had some coaches reach out and say, hey, what does this kid think about this school? Or they'll ask, what does this kid think about our school? It's just we're basically playing as a third party between players and coaches on a telephone. So I think some coaches look into it like the fans do, but I also think there are coaches that basically invest in their own program and their own beliefs, and they don't give a crap who's on that list.
That makes sense. I just wonder, you've got the coach's perspective, obviously what the player wants to put out. And then finally, you talked about it. Fans love the lists. What should we take from the list? When we see specifically, let's say West Virginia's on the list, but it's just, they just announced they're in the portal. A day later, they give out the list that makes it online. What as a fan should you do with that list besides just, we reached out to them, which it feels like that's as far as I go with it. Is there anything else I should take from that?
The initial list?
Yeah, just the initial list.
Right away.
As a fan, what do you do with that?
You pay attention to the initial list.
Okay.
Those are the schools that are way ahead of the curve on everybody else, because in the portal, if you're not it's almost like if you don't know a kid's entering the portal, like the coaches fraternity, they're all competitive on the court, but at the same time, they're going to help each other off the court. So once they hear rumors of a kid entering the portal and he's not officially in, I mean, there's coaches all over the country trying to contact with this kid, not tampering, but waiting until he enters the portal officially through their compliance system. So if you're not contacting this kid within hours of him entering the portal, you're behind, and you're honestly probably not getting him. There are chances where you can contact late and they'll have interest, but you're way behind the curve if you contact late.
Speed is a big deal, and that it gets you, if you make that list, what that tells you as a fan is they've got in early. Doesn't mean that they're going to get the guy, but they've given themselves a good shot in comparison to being late, as you put it.
Yeah, you'll have all these programs content. I mean, these kids' phones are blowing up with every school after them, especially if you're a Power Five player. So just to be on that initial contact list and kind of get that wave out of the way, because at some point that kid's gonna go, well, this school called me, but like I don't care because I have all these other schools that are already contacting me.
Right. Totally makes sense. See, and people had those questions, and that's why I'm here to ask the hard hitting questions. So let's get to WVU. And today we're recording on Tuesday, April 11th, and you've been busy with WVU news in the transfer portal. You've reported a couple of guys are visiting Morgantown soon. This is coming out on Friday, but give us a scoop now. If somebody's been Rip Van Winkelen for the last 3 days and they wake up and listen to this on Friday, who's coming to Morgantown?
Yeah, so big names coming up. First, Jesse Edwards from Syracuse. He will be in Morgantown as this episode releases. He'll be in Morgantown throughout the weekend till Sunday. And as soon as he leaves, Iowa State transfer, West Virginia fans will be familiar with him. Caleb Grill, he'll be arriving Sunday, leaving Tuesday. And then John Hughley from Pitt, another name West Virginia fans will be familiar with, will be in town for spring game weekend next week.
I mean, Huggins is super busy in the portal. Jay Kuntz, the coaching staff. And so a lot of activity. Jose Perez is the host for those two guys, correct?
Yep.
So he goes from sitting all year to being the lead. And he was the lead for the Arizona guard, right?
Yep. He hosted Kirk Krisha. Yep. He's 1 for 1. He's 100% successful.
Well, that's encouraging. I don't know right now if there's enough spots, but I'm sure more musical chairs are going to happen on the roster. But before we get to that, let's talk about this last season, Ethan. We watched the whole season. You went to Portland. You went to Kansas City, right?
Yeah.
For the Big 12 tournament. So you watched this team from first game to the end of the year. They make the NCAA tournament with a 7-11 record in the Big 12. They lose in the first round, coming off of a losing season. Did Bob Huggins fix it this year?
Short answer, yes. The long answer, I know West Virginia basketball, the standard shouldn't be to make the tournament. I think everybody understands that. It's a top 30, 35 program in the country all time. So the standard should always be making second weekend in the NCAA tournament. But when you factor in, at this time last year, all they had was Keedy Johnson and the returning freshmen like Seth Wilson, Kobe Johnson.
They had that loyalty picture of like these 5 guys stuck around, and that was the roster.
That was the roster. They have 5 guys. I don't care. I don't care if it's Bob Huggins or if it's a high school assistant who's starting his first year. That's impressive. Like to be able to bring in Stevenson, Mitchell, Toussaint, JUCOs, Emmett Matthews too. Bringing in all these guys, you have 9 new players, and you at one point are sitting with 15 wins in the middle of February, and you still make the tournament. That's impressive. I don't care if they lost first round. Short answer, yeah, he fixed it. Let's see next season if they can take that next step, because that's the key to me. Is if they can take that next step and be top 25 the entire season and compete at the top of the Big 12. That's the next step for me.
And it was a roller coaster ride to get to the NCAA tournament. And it included firing your associate head coach after starting 0-4, 0-5 in the Big 12. Could you tell a change, Ethan, in the coaching staff and in the vibe in the locker room once that change was made, removing Larry Harrison, adding DeMar Johnson? Could you tell any difference in following the team as far as this is how it felt like before and then after the coaching change? Or is it just business as usual and that stuff just happened?
No, I definitely think there's a new vibe within the program, definitely a younger, kind of more enthusiastic vibe. Larry Harrison, he had a great career. Like, we're not taking anything away from that. He was a great assistant for 15 years under Huggs, and even going back to his days at Cincinnati. So, like, I'm not taking anything away from Coach Harrison. He's a great coach. It's just it's 2023. It's time. It's DeMar Johnson. I've seen him develop the guards. He helped out with Eric and Joe and Jose now. So Definitely a different vibe, a younger vibe, and I feel like the coaching staff, especially on the recruiting side, can collaborate as one, and there's no like issue. They're just recruiting in a smooth flow, just as one team as a staff. So, yeah, definitely a younger, more enthusiastic vibe.
And you say that, Ethan, is that different than what was happening, let's say, in the recruiting cycle last year? Is that a change?
Yeah, I think a little bit because they're taking that next step. Like like I said, I think Stevenson, Matthews, Mitchell, Toussaint were great pickups last year. But then you see like they also added in JUCO kids. They're not targeting any JUCOs currently. So when you only have Hugs as the pro JUCO guy, like left, it's they're basically building throughout the entire transfer portal. And I know they don't have any high school kids coming in this year, but they're already targeting 2024, 25, 26 kids. So I think the plan is just build through the portal and then recruit the top kids in each high school class.
That makes sense. And it definitely is a change. You definitely see a shift in their focus as far as who they're looking for recruiting wise. And so the new guys so far, we talked about Jose Perez, lead recruiter Jose Perez, Omar Silverio, pending a waiver, and the Arizona point guard Kerr Kriisa.
Mm-hmm.
Which of these guys, Ethan, do you think will average the most minutes for WVU next season?
That's tough. I'm gonna narrow it down. I'll give you a straight answer. I think it's Kirk Krisha. Um, I think West Virginia's staff put priority in getting Krisha. I think he was a focal point in who to build around out of the new portal additions. Jose's done a great job at recruiting and helping the staff recruit. I could see him receiving 30 plus minutes, but with Kerr sharing minutes with Joe Toussaint, like both of those guys can be on the floor at the same time. They'll be able to work it out. If Keedy Johnson and Joe Toussaint were able to work together on the floor at the same time offensively, I'm sure Kirk Risha and Toussaint will be able to work as well. So I'll go Kirk Risha. I really think that's who they're building around out of the portal guys.
And true point guard, right? I mean, Joe Toussaint's a true point guard, but he can play off ball. Krisha, and I guess he could play off ball too because he's a good 3-point shooter. But it's interesting, dude, how much they have focused on these older guys, 1 and 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. Perez, I could see being in the guys that go to the preseason Big 12 media things in Kansas City. Like it's already taken that role. So a little like Eric Stevenson. Here's my question. With the 3 guys that came in, all heralded, you look at their stat lines and you can see their offensive numbers. Those guys have all hit a crazy number of threes in a game as kind of a career high. The coach is still Bob Huggins, right? And Bob Huggins is defense, offensive rebounding. When you look at the advanced stats, the defensive efficiency, it improved a little bit from last year. The big jump was in offense. And you see these pickups, Ethan, and it feels like offensive-minded guys. I know it's going to look different than what it looks like now than it will in October. But is this part of the change in focus is really gearing towards offense and hey, let's coach up the defense? Or are they going to go back to the Huggins style of defensive identity and really focusing in on locking people down? Do you see them improving next year defensively? Because on the surface, it seems like they're really trying to get buckets and really focus on offense.
Yeah, I think it's getting offensive guys and hopefully and hoping that they develop their defense. Kirk Risha mentioned that he knows he's gonna have to play defense under Bob Huggins, so at least he's gonna try. So I think the biggest weakness, like just on paper so far, with the guys they've got so far, is there's really no defensive guy or glue guy. There's no like Gabe Osaboyan or Keedy Johnson. I've heard Omar Savario. I've heard he can play defense, so that's hope. But I do think they need a guy in the middle that can, like a Musa Cisse or Jesse Edwards, who's visiting this weekend. I think they could definitely use a guy in the paint that can be that intimidating factor.
And if you say that, Ethan, and they are able to get one of these, be under the basket, guard the rim, protect the rim, is there any hint, and people ask this every year, but is this leaning towards bunch of guards, rim protector? Are we leaning towards more pressing next year? I'm not going to say press Virginia, but is it going that way as far as a defensive identity, or are they going to stick with the man-to-man, maybe full court every once in a while, and kind of keep the same strategy as they have the last couple of seasons?
I think it stays the same. I don't think they're going to go too small. I think they'll have Mitchell at the 4 again if he returns, and that's not necessarily small. Like, that's also not big. So, like, Mitchell's size, that's a traditional power forward size. So, but Mitchell also has that new age of, like, just basketball, like with any big, where he can stretch the floor out at 6'9" and score at any level on the floor. So I think they'll play with 3 guards, Mitchell as a forward, and then they'll have a true big at the 5.
Any news about Huggins' contract talk? I know he's got until, next month to re-up with Ren Baker and see if he wants to push another couple of years. Have you heard any news about contract talks with Huggins?
No, not numbers or not any extension itself. Positive is the word I can say. I think it's trending positive. I think something could get figured out by May 1st.
Okay. Is that the date that we're looking at, May 1st?
Yeah, yep, to keep extending May 1st.
And what about Alex Ruoff? It seemed like he's talking about younger vibe on the staff. Alex Ruoff was a big part of that this season, sat beside Coach Huggins. He was a grad assistant this year. Any news on his future with the program?
No, I don't know what Alex is doing. I hope for West Virginia's sake he does stay. I mean, he played a huge part. He developed Eric the entire year. And you saw how Eric took that leap from South Carolina and then basically being the number 1 option at WVU. Alex worked with him, at least at what I could see, pregame the entire 90 minutes before the game. He's working with Ruoff. So just another young face to have in the program. If you have Dermar Johnson, Alex Ruoff, that's a good start for former Hugs guys, at least.
All right, I'm going to wrap up with some rapid fire, and we're going to play a game, Ethan Bock. It's a brand new game for Unreasonable Doubt. The game is called 0, 1, or 2. So I'm going to give you a scenario, and you tell me, is it 0, is it 1, or is it 2? This is going to sweep the nation. Seth Wilson and Kobe Johnson. How many of those 2 guys do you think will be on the roster next season? 0, 1, or 2?
If they land Caleb Grill, 0.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I mean, it is a number.
It's natural. It's just it's people are going to overreact. I know West Virginia, like, it's not just West Virginia fans. Any fan of college basketball would overreact to seeing Seth Wilson or Kobe Johnson enter the portal. But I think it's just natural. They're like, I don't know how you can tell those guys for your 3rd year if to ask them to come off the bench again. They're going to want to play more. And I think it would just be good for both parties. I think for both of those guys to get more playing time.
I don't have any question about them seeing if it's a writing on the wall situation. Then you look there after their first year, you see they go in, the coaching staff goes in for Toussaint and Stevenson. It's like, all right, where's my playing time? This year, Perez, Silverio, Krisa, all guards, Caleb Grill's coming to town. Like, that is for a guy who's coming in his 3rd year in the program, you're seeing the same thing happen of, glass half full. These are guys that I'm going to compete with to try to get playing time. Glass half empty. They keep telling me, I hate to say this, they keep telling me that they're looking to upgrade for me, and thus I need to do something. So I totally get that. It is a shock to the system of guys who come in as high school guys and are recruited and then are told after their first season, essentially, we got to do better than you. I mean, am I reading that wrong?
No, it's exactly it's what happens in every program. I'm honestly shocked that West Virginia's only lost 2 players to the portal the entire offseason. Like, you just naturally thinking of all the young guys that they have on this roster, and then they bring in all these 4 or 5 year guys. It should have been natural for some of these young guys to want to leave.
Of course. It totally. I mean, you're
As of
seeing
now, they're
it.
sticking it out. So we'll
Right.
see.
Yeah, we'll absolutely see. But Ethan Bock says 0. Another 0, 1, or 2. Jimmy Bell and Trey Mitchell. How many of those two will be on next season's roster? 0, 1, or 2?
I'll go 2.
Interesting.
I'll go 2. I think Trey. I think Trey opts into his 5th year. That's just a guess right now. He's still weighing options. And then with Jimmy, I don't see why he would want to leave. I don't. So I think 2.
All right. So 2 there. 0, 1, or 2. Number of swingmen that will be added to this roster through the transfer portal this offseason. 0, 1, or 2.
I'll go 1.
It's Josiah.
Yeah.
And it's let's say Sumnick, but he was playing 4 and 5 last year. I don't think he ever played at 3.
They had him playing the 5, I feel like, most of the year.
So then you wonder, all right, is Perez or Silverio, are they going to take Hug is going to do a 3-guard lineup, or even like a Villanova style of 3 or 4 guards in there with a big guy? But Harris is the only 3 that I see on the roster, and the focus so far has been guards and big guys. So is that what we're going to see? Is Josiah in that spot and then work around that?
Yeah, I honestly think Jose doesn't. I think people have said that Jose will play the 2. I think he plays the 3. I think he's more. I think him and Kirk Krisha and Joe Toussaint will be sharing the ball. They'll be mostly the primary ball handlers. You could definitely see guys like Savario play the 3. But yeah, I think Josiah, I think JoJo is your only true 3 on the roster next year. I could see them adding a 3 and D kind of guy, or an athletic wing like Emmett or Jalen, like that kind of build, 6'7" guy. But no, I think if they add that, it's just one guy.
Yeah. All right. So we have a 0, we have a 1, we have a 2. 0, 1, or 2. Number of recruiting classes in 2024 and 2025 that have a high schooler in them. 0, 1, or 2.
I'll go 2. I don't think the staff's going totally away from recruiting high school, especially after bringing Dermar Johnson in. He's attacking the whole DMV area. He's offering all of these 4 or 5-star kids from the DMV area. So I don't think they strike out on both of those classes. I think they find a way to keep bringing in high school guys, and they're gonna have to at some point. They can't. I don't think they can retool with the transfer portal every single offseason. I'm sure they can. I just gave them a challenge right there. I'm sure they're able to do it. They've done it the last 2 off seasons, but at some point you got to also bring in either a freshman from the portal, or you got to bring in a high school kid. You got to have some youth and development.
West Virginia's pitch may not change. I mean, Johnson goes in and it's a different guy recruiting, but the other guys recruiting that high schooler against West Virginia are going to say, look at their program and see how the freshmen have fared. That's going to be a tough sell. And I don't know, maybe Johnson's a guy to say, you're different than the guys in the last 4 years that haven't stuck around.
Yeah, I don't see the developing of 3 stars that Hugs has done forever. It doesn't work anymore. You don't, for example, like a Seth Wilson or Kobe Johnson. You just don't have time to develop those guys for 3, 4, 5 years anymore. You don't, because once a certain amount of time hits, they're going to want to leave and hit the transfer portal. So you have to go after these 4 or 5-star high school kids who could almost go one and done. So
I get it. I mean, it is a conundrum when you're trying to figure out the right mix and have some continuity as well as success. So it's going to be interesting. I'm interested to see how they do that and who comes in. Last 0, 1, or 2 question. Number of new Big 12 schools that make the NCAA tournament next season. 0, 1, or 2. And technically you could say 3 or 4, but let's play the game 0, 1, or 2.
1.
And it's Houston, right?
Yep. No doubt. The other three are gonna have a tough time. I agree with Hugs. And it's nothing like all three of those programs are trying to build on something. Cincinnati's got a couple transfers over the weekend. They're going to compete. It's not like those schools won't go 2-16 in league play. They will have 4, 5, 6 wins. But at the same time, like adding Houston and keeping Texas and Oklahoma in the conference for like one more year, that's insane. You have Kansas, Texas, Houston at the top, TCU, K-State, West Virginia, Texas Tech, all in this little bubble. Add Iowa State in there. Like there's still like 7 to 8 tournament teams in this league, and we're not even these teams haven't even retooled in the portal yet. So
I think Houston has the best chance to make a smooth transition just because of how dominant they've been the last 5 years. But it is going to be a change for them. Like I'll be interested to see how they handle that, because it is, there's no South Florida, there's no East Carolina, you're not getting a break in the schedule.
Yeah, Houston added LJ Cryer, so he doesn't even they already have a Big 12 player on their teams. Houston the last 5 years has played like a Big 12 team. They just have been in a different conference. They have, like, Kelvin Sampson's done this perfectly. He has tall guards and he has small forwards or small bigs. It's perfect. He has athletic guys that can drive to the paint, kick it out, rebound. They rebound really well. Their culture has been impressive to be able to maintain through the transfer portal era. So I think it'll be smoothless for him.
All right. Thank you for playing 0, 1, and 2. And thank you for getting us up to speed on what's going on in the portal, what's going on with WVU. It's always a pleasure. I hope you come back next year. Ethan Bock, thank you for joining me on Unreasonable Doubt, a podcast about West Virginia University basketball.
Thank you, Josh. Always, like I said, always here to talk hoops every year. So just let me know.
All right. Thanks. Are you on the Twitter? Unreasonable Doubts on the Twitter. Find stuff about the podcast and other takes that aren't on the podcast on Twitter at I'm Josh Witt. IMJOSHWHITT. Check it out. The Twitter. Big thanks to Ethan for joining me on the podcast. Superstar Ethan Bock. You can find him on Twitter at @EthanBock_. That's it for this episode of Unreasonable Doubt. Listen on all the platforms. That hasn't changed. Apple Podcasts still there. Spotify still there. Overcast, I think I'm still there. YouTube, I think I'm still gonna be there. I'll keep you posted on that. It's actually YouTube. Until next time, I'm Josh Witt. This has been Unreasonable Doubt. WVU for the 2022-2023 season. They had 19 wins and they had 15 losses.